The first thing you learn about betrayal is that it has a smell. Not metaphorically, literally. It smells like expensive perfume applied too heavily, like lies told so often they become truth, like the particular brand of desperation that comes from trying too hard to appear happy. I'm Merrick, and I've been breathing that smell for 6 months without knowing what it was. Tonight, elbow deep in sawdust and wood stain in my garage workshop, I finally figured it out. The revelation came courtesy of my 16-year-old daughter Emma's voice, carrying through the thin walls between the house and my sanctuary. "Mom, you can't keep pretending he doesn't exist," Emma was saying, her tone sharp with teenage exasperation. "People are starting to talk." "Let them talk," came my wife Tessa's voice, cold as January morning. "After Saturday, it won't matter what anyone thinks. The whole charade will be over." I set down my sanding block, the piece of cherry wood I'd been smoothing forgotten. 23 years of marriage, and Tessa had never called our life a charade. Not even during our worst fights. "You really think Aunt Nessa won't invite him?" Emma asked. "Your aunt knows exactly what she's doing. The invitation was very specific about who's welcome at this celebration." Celebration. The word hit me like a splinter under the fingernail, sharp, unexpected, and impossible to ignore. I'd been building custom furniture in this garage for 15 years, ever since I realized that working with my hands paid better than my college degree in business administration. Tessa used to bring me coffee while I worked, back when she was still climbing the ladder at Morrison & Associates Architecture, back when my success mattered to her. These days, she barely acknowledged that I existed, let alone that my woodworking business had paid for half of everything we owned. "The whole family will be there," Tessa continued. "Julian's been so supportive through this whole transition. He understands what it's like to be married to someone with real ambition." Julian, my brother-in-law, married to Tessa's sister Nessa for 12 years. The guy who'd never worked a day of manual labor in his life, who made partner at his law firm by schmoozing clients at the country club I couldn't afford to join. "Dad's not that bad," Emma said, though her voice lacked conviction. "He works hard." "Working hard isn't enough anymore, sweetheart. Sometimes you have to make difficult choices about the kind of life you want to live." I stood there in my garage, surrounded by the tools that had built our comfortable suburban life, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet. Just a cold, clear understanding that the ground beneath my feet had been eroding for months, and I'd been too busy working to notice. The conversation moved away from the kitchen, voices fading as they headed upstairs. I waited 10 minutes, then slipped through the connecting door into the house. Our kitchen still smelled like the salmon I'd grilled for dinner. Dinner that Tessa had picked at while scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging my attempts at conversation. Her purse sat on the counter where she'd dropped it, expensive leather that cost more than most people made in a week. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'm not ashamed of it either. When your wife starts talking about celebrations you're not invited to, you start looking for answers. The invitation was tucked between her credit cards and business cards, cream-colored paper with elegant script. "Celebrating new beginnings," it read, followed by an address I recognized as Nessa's house. The date was this Saturday, 3 days away. My name had been written in pencil at the bottom, then erased so thoroughly that only the faintest impression remained. Someone had taken care to remove me from this celebration entirely. I photographed the invitation with my phone and slipped it back where I'd found it. Then I did something that would have seemed paranoid 6 months ago, but felt perfectly reasonable now. I started looking through the rest of her things. The gym bag yielded the real treasure. Tucked into a side pocket I'd never noticed was a phone I'd never seen before. Not her usual iPhone with the cracked screen she'd been meaning to replace, but a cheap Android with a pink case. The kind of phone you bought when you needed to keep secrets. It wasn't password protected. Tessa had always been careless with technology, relying on her assistant to handle anything more complicated than basic calls and texts. That carelessness was about to cost her everything. 6 months of messages to someone listed as J in her contacts. 6 months of my wife's real thoughts about our marriage, our life, and me. Can't wait until this is all over. Read one from last week. Cole is so clueless. He actually asked if I wanted to go to that new restaurant for our anniversary, as if I'd want to be seen there with him. The lake house sounds perfect for next weekend. Read another. Tell Nessa you're taking me to that spa in Portland. She'll never question it. Lake house. Julian owned a place on Sebago Lake, about an hour north of our suburb. He'd inherited it from his father and loved to brag about the renovations he'd done, the boat he kept there, the privacy it offered. I scrolled back further, watching my marriage disintegrate in reverse chronological order. The messages grew more explicit as I went back, more detailed in their mockery of my obliviousness. But it was the strategic planning that really got to me. The careful coordination of lies, the discussion of timing, the cold calculation of how to extract maximum value from our joint assets before making their move. Book club Thursday? Jay had texted 2 months ago. Perfect. Cole will be at his boxing gym until 9. We'll have the house to ourselves. Boxing gym. I'd been going to Mickey's gym every Thursday for 3 years, ever since my doctor told me I needed to do something about my health. Tessa had encouraged it, said she was proud of me for taking better care of myself. Apparently, she'd been proud of me for giving her a predictable window of opportunity. The timestamp on that message was from a Thursday when I'd come home to find candles lit in the bedroom, wine glasses in the sink, and Tessa in a suspiciously good mood. I'd thought she was being romantic. I'd actually thanked her for making an effort with our relationship. The phone buzzed in my hands. New message from Jay. Saturday can't come soon enough. Once everything's out in the open, we won't have to sneak around anymore. Nessa's so excited about the party, she has no idea what we're really celebrating. I stared at that message for a full minute, pieces clicking into place. The party wasn't just about celebrating my wife leaving me. It was about celebrating her upgrade to my brother-in-law, the man who'd sat at my dinner table dozens of times, who'd borrowed my tools, who'd asked my advice about everything from investments to lawn care, the man who'd been sleeping with my wife for 6 months while his own wife planned a party to celebrate their new beginning. I took screenshots of everything, not just the recent messages, but the entire conversation thread. 6 months of evidence that would make any divorce attorney salivate. Then, I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it and walked back to my garage. The cherry wood was still sitting on my workbench, half sanded and forgotten. I picked up where I'd left off, the familiar rhythm of the work helping me think. Tessa thought I was clueless. Julian thought I was beneath his notice. Nessa was throwing them a party to celebrate how successfully they'd fooled me. They had no idea what they'd just handed me. I worked until 2 in the morning, sanding that piece of wood until it was smooth as glass. By the time I finally headed inside, I had a plan forming. Not just for the divorce, that was inevitable now, but for the party. After all, it would be rude not to attend a celebration in my honor. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of gray drizzle that makes everything look washed out and depressing. Perfect weather for surveillance, as it turned out. I'd spent Monday night lying awake next to my wife, listening to her breathe and wondering how long she'd been practicing the art of sleeping peacefully next to someone she was actively betraying. She'd always been a sound sleeper, but now I wondered if it was natural or just the sleep of someone whose conscience had been surgically removed. The boxing gym opened at 5 a.m. I'd never been there that early before, but Mickey Torino had given me a key months ago after I'd helped him install new equipment. Mickey was old-school Boston, the kind of guy who'd moved to Maine to escape the city, but brought all of his street smarts with him. "You look like someone ran over your dog," Mickey said when I walked in. He was already working the heavy bag, despite being 73 years old. "What's eating you, Cole?" "Just need to work some things out," I said, wrapping my hands with more care than usual. "Mind if I pick your brain about something?" "Shoot." I started with the speed bag, finding my rhythm before I spoke. Hypothetically, if someone was planning to humiliate you in public, what would be the best way to turn the tables? Mickey stopped punching and looked at me with the kind of attention he usually reserved for teaching proper footwork. We talking about Tessa? Hypothetically. Uh-huh. He grabbed a towel and wiped his face. Hypothetically, the best revenge is the kind where they do most of the work themselves. You just provide the stage. Meaning? Meaning people who think they're smarter than everyone else usually aren't as careful as they should be. They get cocky, make mistakes. Your job is to be ready when they do. I worked the bags for another hour, Mickey's words echoing in my head. By the time I left, I had the beginnings of a real plan. The first stop was Best Buy, where I purchased a small digital camera with night vision capability. The kind marketed to hunters and security-conscious homeowners. Nothing fancy, nothing that would raise eyebrows. Just a simple device that could record high-definition video in low-light conditions. The second stop was more delicate. 3 months ago, Tessa had insisted we install a nanny cam in our bedroom. Not because we had a nanny, Emma was 16 and hardly needed supervision, but because she'd read an article about home invasions and convinced herself that burglars always hit the master bedroom first. I'd installed the camera in the crown molding above our dresser, angled to cover the entire room. 2 weeks later, Tessa had decided it was creepy and made me take it down. I'd removed it, but I'd never actually disconnected the wireless receiver in my workshop. It took me 20 minutes to reinstall the camera, positioning it in the same spot where it had been before. The angle was perfect. Anyone in our bed would be clearly visible, and the audio pickup was sensitive enough to catch whispered conversations. If Tessa was bringing Julian to our house, to our bedroom, I was going to have proof. The third stop was the most important, a conversation with my accountant. Margaret Hensley had been handling my business finances for 8 years. She was sharp, discreet, and had no patience for people who tried to hide assets during divorce proceedings. I'd seen her eviscerate more than one cheating spouse who thought they could outsmart the system. "Cole," she said when I walked into her office, "this is unexpected. Everything okay?" "I need to ask you about protecting business assets," I said. "Hypothetically." She leaned back in her chair, studying my face. "Hypothetically, someone's marriage is in trouble." "Hypothetically." Well, hypothetically, the most important thing is documentation. Proving which assets were acquired before the marriage, which were built through individual effort versus joint contribution, and establishing a clear paper trail for everything. She pulled out a legal pad and started writing. "Hypothetically, I'd recommend opening a separate business account immediately, moving all business-related income and expenses through that account, creating a clear separation between marital and individual assets." "What about joint accounts?" "That's trickier. You can't just drain them. That looks vindictive and courts don't like it. But you can document everything. Every withdrawal, every expenditure, every transfer. If someone's been moving money around without your knowledge, you want to catch it early." I left Margaret's office with a folder full of forms and a clear understanding of what I needed to do. By Thursday, I'd have a complete financial picture of everything Tessa had been doing with our money. But first, I had a test to run. That evening, I announced that I was going to Mickey's gym as usual. Tessa barely looked up from her laptop, just nodded, and made some comment about picking up dinner for herself and Emma. Nothing unusual there. She'd been avoiding family dinners for weeks. Instead of going to the gym, I drove to the parking lot of a coffee shop about a mile from our house and waited. If my theory was correct, Julian would be making an appearance at my house within the hour. At 7:15, a silver BMW pulled into our driveway. Julian's car, the one with the vanity plates that read Lawman 1. He sat in the car for a moment, probably checking to make sure I was really gone, then walked up to my front door like he owned the place. I waited another 10 minutes, then drove home. The house looked normal from the outside. Julian's car was still in the driveway, but he'd moved it to the side where it wouldn't be visible from the street. clever. He'd done this before. I parked at the end of the block and walked back, using the spare key I kept hidden under the deck stairs. The wireless receiver in my workshop was already recording, but I wanted to see for myself what was happening in my house. The sounds from upstairs left no room for doubt. My wife and my brother-in-law were in my bedroom, in my bed, making no effort to keep quiet. They thought they were safe, thought they had the house to themselves for another hour and a half. I stood in my own kitchen, listening to my marriage end, and felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Not heartbreak, that would come later. This was something else. Something that felt like the moment when you realize you've been playing a game where everyone else knew the rules except you. I left the house as quietly as I'd entered and drove to Mickey's gym. Spent 2 hours working the heavy bag until my knuckles were raw and my shirt was soaked with sweat. When I got home at 9:30, Julian's car was gone, and Tessa was in the living room watching television. "How was the gym?" she asked without looking away from the screen. "Productive," I said. "Very productive." The wireless receiver had captured everything. 2 hours of high-definition video that would make any divorce attorney's day. But more importantly, it had captured their conversation afterward, the pillow talk where people say things they'd never admit in daylight. "Saturday's going to be perfect," Julian's voice came through clearly on the recording. "Nessa's so excited about finally having a reason to cut Cole out of the family. She's never liked him." "He's going to be devastated when he finds out," Tessa had replied. "Part of me almost feels bad for him." "Don't. He's had 23 years to make something of himself. It's not your fault he peaked in high school. The divorce should be straightforward. Margaret thinks she can get me half of everything, plus alimony." Margaret Hensley was my accountant, not Tessa's. But apparently, my wife had been doing some research of her own. "What about Emma?" "She'll adjust. Kids are resilient. And honestly, Julian, she'll be better off with a stepfather who can actually provide for her future." I turned off the recording and sat in my workshop, surrounded by the tools and projects that represented 15 years of building something I was proud of. The cherry wood piece I'd been sanding was finished now, smooth and ready for stain. In the right light, you could see the grain pattern, the hidden beauty that only emerged when you knew how to look for it. By Saturday, everyone would know how to look for the hidden patterns in my marriage. I had 3 days to prepare for the party of a lifetime. Wednesday brought unseasonably warm weather, the kind of October day that makes you forget winter is coming. Perfect weather for reconnaissance. I'd spent the morning at Margaret's office, going through financial records with the thoroughness of a forensic accountant. What we found was enlightening, to say the least. "She's been careful," Margaret said, pointing to a series of transfers from our joint savings account. "Never more than $5,000 at a time, always with a plausible explanation. Home improvement, Emma's school expenses, that sort of thing." But the timing is suspicious. Look here. Every transfer corresponds to a weekend when she claimed to be at conferences or visiting friends, and the money's not going where she says it is. The paper trail led to a separate account I'd never seen before, one that had been opened 6 months ago, the same time frame as the secret phone and the beginning of her relationship with Julian. "There's more," Margaret said, sliding another folder across her desk. "I did some checking on Julian Kepler's finances, public records, business filings, that sort of thing. Julian's law practice was in trouble, not failing exactly, but definitely struggling. 3 major clients had left in the past year, and he'd been borrowing against his partnership stake to cover operating expenses. The lake house was mortgaged to the hilt, and his credit cards were maxed out. He needs money," I said. "He needs a lot of money. And your wife has access to a joint account with a healthy balance, plus a business owner husband who's been too trusting to pay attention to where the money goes." It was a classic setup. Julian seduces my wife, convinces her that she deserves better, and helps her systematically drain our assets while planning their new life together. The only problem with their plan was that they'd underestimated exactly how much attention I'd been paying to my own finances. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "First, we protect what we can. I've already moved your business accounts to a different bank. Second, we document everything. Every transaction, every transfer, every lie she's told about where the money went. Third, we prepare for war." I left Margaret's office with a briefcase full of evidence and a clear understanding of what I was up against. This wasn't just about an affair. It was about a systematic plan to destroy my life and steal everything I'd worked for. But two could play that game. My next stop was a place I'd never expected to visit, a private investigator's office in downtown Portland. Rick Santos had been recommended by Margaret, who'd used him in several messy divorce cases. "Cheating spouse?" he asked when I walked into his cluttered office. "Among other things." I showed him the photos from the secret phone, the financial records, and the video from my bedroom. Rick listened without judgment, taking notes and asking pointed questions about timelines and evidence. "You've done good work," he said finally. "Better than most people who come in here. But you're missing something important." "What?" "The sister, Nessa. If she's throwing this party, she either knows about the affair or she's being played just as hard as you are." I hadn't considered that angle. Nessa Halvor was Tessa's older sister, married to Julian for 12 years. She was the family matriarch, the one who controlled the purse strings and made the social decisions. If Julian was planning to leave her for Tessa, he was giving up a lot more than just a marriage. "Nessa's got money," Rick continued. "Real money. Inherited from their father, plus what she's made in real estate. Julian's been living off her wealth for years. If he's planning to trade up to your wife, there's got to be something in it for him besides love." "Such as?" "Such as your wife's been telling him she's worth more than she actually is. Or he's planning to take Nessa for everything she's got before he makes his move." Rick agreed to do some digging into Julian's recent activities, focusing on any large transactions or unusual behavior. He also offered to do surveillance on Saturday's party, but I declined. I had my own plans for Saturday. Thursday evening, I skipped the gym and went straight home. If my theory was correct, Tessa would be expecting me to be gone for 2 hours. Instead, I was going to give her a surprise. I parked at the coffee shop again and waited. Sure enough, Julian's BMW appeared in my driveway at 7:20. This time, I was ready for him. I'd spent the afternoon preparing. The wireless camera was recording, but I'd also set up my phone to live stream video to a cloud storage account. Whatever happened tonight would be preserved forever, in multiple formats, with timestamps that would hold up in court. But more importantly, I'd prepared a little surprise for my guests. I waited 30 minutes, then drove home and parked right behind Julian's car, blocking him in. Then I walked through my front door like I owned the place, which, technically, I still did. The sounds from upstairs stopped immediately. I could hear frantic whispering, scrambling footsteps, the sound of someone trying to get dressed quickly. "Honey, I'm home," I called out cheerfully. "Hope you don't mind, but I cut the gym short tonight. Wasn't feeling great." More frantic whispering, a door closing, the sound of someone trying to sneak down the back stairs. I walked into the kitchen and started making coffee, taking my time with the process, grinding beans, measuring water, setting up the machine with the deliberate care of someone who had all the time in the world. Julian appeared in the kitchen doorway, trying to look casual despite his rumpled clothes and guilty expression. "Hey, Cole," he said. "Didn't expect to see you tonight." "I'll bet you didn't." I smiled at him, the kind of smile you give someone when you're holding all the cards. "Coffee?" "Actually, I was just leaving. Tessa called me about some legal advice, but it turns out it wasn't that urgent." Legal advice, at 8 o'clock on a Thursday night, in my bedroom. Julian's face went pale. "I don't know what you think you heard, but—" "I didn't hear anything, Julian. I saw everything." I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot from the wireless camera. High-definition, full-color, absolutely unmistakable evidence of what had been happening in my house for the past 6 months. Julian stared at the image for a long moment, then sank into one of my kitchen chairs. Cole, listen, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You're a lawyer, after all. Explaining things is what you do. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down across from him. But before you start, let me ask you something. Does Nessa know about Saturday's party? What? The party. The celebration of new beginnings. Does your wife know what you're really celebrating? Julian's expression shifted from guilt to confusion to something that looked almost like fear. How do you know about that? I know about a lot of things, Julian. I know about the secret phone. I know about the financial transfers. I know about your law practice circling the drain and your need for a new source of income. I leaned back in my chair, enjoying the way his face got paler with each revelation. What I don't know is whether you're planning to take Nessa's money with you when you leave, or if you're just going to abandon her for my wife and hope for the best. You don't understand the situation. I understand it perfectly. You seduced my wife, convinced her to steal money from our joint accounts, and now you're planning some kind of grand reveal at a party that your own wife is throwing. The only question is whether Nessa's in on it, or whether she's about to get the same surprise I am. Julian stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. I need to go. No, you need to stay and finish this conversation. Because here's the thing, Julian. I'm going to be at that party on Saturday, and I'm going to bring some visual aids that I think everyone will find very educational. He stared at me for a moment, then turned and walked toward the door. I followed him, still carrying my coffee cup. Julian, I called out as he reached his car. One more thing. You might want to talk to Nessa before Saturday, because if she doesn't know what's coming, she's going to find out in front of 30 people, and something tells me she's not going to take it well. He drove away without responding, tires squealing as he backed out of my driveway. I stood on my front porch, sipping coffee and watching his taillights disappear into the night. Upstairs, Tessa was probably trying to figure out how much I knew and what I was planning to do about it. She'd find out soon enough. Saturday was 2 days away, and I had a presentation to prepare. Friday morning, I woke up before dawn with the kind of clarity that comes from having a purpose. Tessa was still asleep beside me, or pretending to be. We hadn't spoken since Thursday night's encounter with Julian, and the silence in our house had taken on the quality of a held breath. I made coffee in the dark kitchen, then headed to my workshop to review the evidence I'd collected. The wireless camera had captured everything from Thursday night, not just the affair, but the panicked conversation afterward when they thought I'd left. He knows, Julian's voice came through clearly on the recording. I don't know how much, but he knows about us. That's impossible, Tessa had replied. He's completely oblivious. He always has been. Then explain how he knew about the party, how he knew about my finances. Maybe Emma said something, or maybe he's just guessing. He wasn't guessing, Tessa. He had details, specific information about things we've never discussed in front of anyone. There was a long pause, then Tessa's voice again, smaller now. What do we do? We stick to the plan. Tomorrow night everything comes out anyway. Nessa's expecting us to make some kind of announcement about our relationship. If Cole knows, then we're just moving up the timeline. But what if he tries to stop us? How? He's got no legal standing. By tomorrow night, you'll have filed for divorce and we'll be public about our relationship. There's nothing he can do except make a scene, and that'll just make him look pathetic. I turned off the recording and sat back in my chair. They were right about one thing. I couldn't stop them from going public with their relationship, but they were wrong about everything else. The first item on my agenda was a trip to the rental center downtown. I needed a projector, the kind used for business presentations and school assemblies. Something with enough brightness to work in a well-lit room and enough resolution to make every detail crystal clear. Big presentation? Asked the clerk, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20. You could say that. It's a family gathering. I want to make sure everyone can see the details. I tested the projector in the parking lot, connecting it to my laptop and running through the video files I'd prepared. The image quality was perfect. Sharp, bright, and absolutely unmistakable. Even in daylight, you could see every face, read every expression, hear every word. My next stop was Office Depot, where I printed 30 copies of a document I'd prepared with Margaret's help. Financial records, bank statements, and a timeline of transfers from our joint accounts. Each copy was bound in a professional folder with a cover sheet that read, "Evidence of financial fraud in the marriage of Cole and Tessa Merrick." The folders fit perfectly in a briefcase, along with USB drives containing the video evidence. Everything organized, everything documented, everything ready for distribution. But the most important preparation was mental. I spent the afternoon in my workshop, not building anything, just thinking through every possible scenario for tomorrow night. What Tessa might say, how Julian might react, what Nessa would do when she realized what had been happening under her nose. I'd been angry for days now, but the anger was settling into something colder and more focused. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about justice. Emma came into the workshop around dinner time, carrying a sandwich and wearing the kind of expression that meant she wanted to talk about something serious. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." She sat down on the stool I kept by my workbench, picking at her sandwich without eating it. "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hung in the air between us. Emma was 16, old enough to understand what was happening even if no one had explained it to her directly. She'd been watching the tension in our house, the late-night arguments, the way her mother had been treating me like a stranger. "What makes you ask that?" "Mom's been different lately. And you've been spending a lot of time out here," she gestured around the workshop. "Plus, there's this party tomorrow night that everyone's talking about, but no one will tell me what it's actually for." I set down the piece of wood I'd been holding and looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She had Tessa's eyes but my stubborn chin, and right now she looked like someone who was tired of being treated like a child. "Yes," I said. "We probably are." Emma nodded like she'd been expecting that answer. "Is it because of Uncle Julian?" The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. "What do you know about Uncle Julian?" "I'm not stupid, Dad. I've seen his car here when you're supposed to be at the gym, and Mom gets this weird smile whenever his name comes up." She took a bite of her sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. "Plus, Aunt Nessa's been acting super weird about this party, like she's excited about something but trying not to show it." "How do you feel about all this?" Emma shrugged, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. "I feel like everyone's been lying to me, and I feel bad for Aunt Nessa, because I don't think she knows what's really going on." "What makes you say that?" "She called me last week to ask if you were okay. Said you seemed distant at the last family dinner, and she was worried that you felt left out of family events." Emma's voice got smaller. "She really cares about you, Dad. She thinks of you as her brother, not just her sister's husband." That information hit harder than I'd expected. Nessa wasn't part of the conspiracy. She was another victim. The party tomorrow wasn't just about humiliating me. It was about destroying her marriage, too. "Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay." "Tomorrow night, things are going to get very complicated. Your mom and I are going to have some difficult conversations, and other people in the family are going to find out things that might be hard to hear." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I want you to know that whatever happens between your mother and me, it has nothing to do with you. You're the best thing that ever came out of our marriage, and that's never going to change." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "Are you going to the party?" "Yes." "Are you going to tell everyone what's been happening?" I considered lying, protecting her from what was coming, but she'd already figured out most of it on her own, and she deserved the truth. "Yes." "Good," she said fiercely. "Someone should." That evening, Tessa came home late from work, carrying flowers and a bottle of wine. She was making an effort to appear normal, but there was something forced about her cheerfulness. "I thought we could have a nice dinner together," she said, arranging the flowers in a vase. "Just the two of us. Emma's staying at a friend's house tonight." "That's thoughtful." She cooked pasta with more attention than she'd given to any meal in months, chattering about her day at work and asking about my projects. It was almost like the old days, when we used to enjoy each other's company. "Cole," she said as we finished eating, "I want you to know that whatever happens, I hope we can stay friends. For Emma's sake, if nothing else. Whatever happens. Well, you know, life changes, people grow apart. It doesn't have to be ugly." I looked at my wife across the dinner table, this woman I'd loved for more than half my adult life, and felt something like pity. She still thought she was in control of the situation, still thought she could manage the narrative and minimize the damage. "You're right," I said. "It doesn't have to be ugly." But tomorrow night, it was going to be spectacular. Saturday dawned clear and cold, the kind of October day that makes you believe in fresh starts and new beginnings. Ironic, considering what I had planned. I spent the morning in my workshop going through my equipment one final time. The projector was tested and ready, the laptop loaded with video files and connected to external speakers for better audio quality. The briefcase held 30 folders of financial evidence, each one a complete picture of 6 months of systematic deception. But the most important piece of equipment was something I'd installed 3 days ago, a small wireless transmitter that would broadcast everything happening at Nessa's party to a private streaming service. Whatever went down tonight would be preserved forever, with multiple witnesses who could access the feed from their phones. I'd sent the link to 5 people: Margaret, my accountant, Rick, the private investigator, Mickey from the gym, and 2 neighbors who'd always been friendly to me but had grown cold toward Tessa in recent months. They'd know what to do with the footage if things went badly. Emma knocked on the workshop door around noon, dressed for her job at the local coffee shop. "Dad, I just wanted to say, whatever happens tonight, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Thanks, kiddo. That means everything to me." "Are you scared?" I considered the question. "No, I'm ready." She hugged me tight, then stepped back and looked me in the eye. Give them hell. After Emma left for work, I took a long shower and dressed carefully. Not formal, this wasn't that kind of party, but sharp. Dark jeans, a button-down shirt that Tessa had always said looked good on me, and the leather jacket I'd bought myself for my 40th birthday. I wanted to look like someone who belonged, someone who couldn't be easily dismissed or ejected. The projector and laptop fit into a rolling case that looked like standard AV equipment. The briefcase was professional but unremarkable. To anyone watching, I'd look like a contractor arriving to set up for a presentation, which, in a way, I was. Nessa's house was in the most expensive part of our suburb, a sprawling colonial on 2 acres, with a circular driveway and professionally maintained landscaping. Cars were already arriving when I pulled up at 6:30, 30 minutes after the party's official start time. I recognized most of the vehicles: family members, close friends, a few people from Tessa's work. The kind of intimate gathering where everyone would know everyone else, where news would spread through the entire social circle within hours. Perfect. I parked at the end of the driveway and sat in my truck for a moment, watching people walk up to the front door. They were dressed casually but expensively, carrying wine bottles and gift bags. Whatever they thought they were celebrating, they'd come prepared to make it memorable. Julian's BMW was parked near the front door, positioned like he was the guest of honor. Tessa's car was right beside it, the 2 vehicles so close together they looked like a matched set. I grabbed my equipment and walked up the driveway with the confidence of someone who belonged. The front door was open, music and conversation spilling out onto the porch. I could see Nessa in the foyer, greeting guests with the kind of genuine warmth that made everyone feel welcome. She spotted me as I reached the door, and her face lit up with surprised pleasure. "Cole, I'm so glad you could make it. When Tessa said you might not be able to come, I was so disappointed." Wouldn't miss it for the world, I said, giving her a hug. Where would you like me to set up the equipment? Equipment? I gestured to the rolling case. For the presentation. Tessa asked me to bring the projector so everyone could see the photos properly. Nessa looked confused for a moment, then her expression cleared. Oh, of course, the living room would be perfect. There's a big blank wall where everyone can see. She led me through the house, chattering about the party preparations and how excited she was to have the whole family together. I followed her into the living room, where about 20 people were already gathered, drinks in hand, talking in the animated way that meant the evening was just getting started. Tessa was standing near the fireplace with Julian, both of them holding wine glasses and looking relaxed. They were positioned like hosts, like the people everyone had come to celebrate. When Tessa saw me, her face went through several expressions in quick succession: surprise, confusion, and something that might have been fear. "Cole," she said, her voice artificially bright. "What are you doing here?" "Setting up for your presentation," I replied, beginning to unpack the projector. Nessa said the living room wall would work perfectly. "What presentation?" Julian stepped forward, his lawyer instincts kicking in. "Cole, I don't think anyone requested AV equipment tonight." "Really?" I looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. "That's strange. I was specifically asked to bring a projector so everyone could see the photos that explain what we're really celebrating tonight." The conversation in the room was beginning to die down as people sensed tension. Nessa moved closer, still trying to play the gracious hostess, but clearly confused by the undercurrents she was picking up on. "Maybe there was a miscommunication," she said diplomatically. "But since you went to the trouble of bringing everything, why don't you go ahead and set it up? I'm sure whatever you want to share will be lovely." "Oh, it's going to be unforgettable," I said, connecting the laptop to the projector. "Everyone's going to see exactly what kind of new beginning we're celebrating." Tessa moved toward me, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "Cole, whatever you think you're doing, this isn't the place. Actually, this is exactly the place," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. After all, Nessa went to so much trouble to organize this celebration. It would be rude not to give everyone the full story. The projector hummed to life, casting a bright rectangle of light on the wall. I opened the laptop and navigated to the video file I'd prepared, a compilation of the best footage from the wireless camera, edited for maximum impact, and set to a timeline that would tell the complete story. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "if I could have your attention for just a few minutes, I have something I'd like to share with you. A behind-the-scenes look at the new beginning we're here to celebrate." Julian started toward me, but Mickey Torino stepped into his path. I hadn't even seen Mickey arrive, but there he was, 73 years old and built like a brick wall, smiling pleasantly at Julian while making it clear that he wasn't going anywhere. "Let the man give his presentation," Mickey said. "I'm curious to see what he's got to show us." I clicked play, and the first image appeared on the wall. High definition, full color, absolutely unmistakable footage of my wife and my brother-in-law in my bedroom 3 days ago. The room went completely silent. Then Nessa screamed. The sound that came out of Nessa's throat wasn't quite human. It was the kind of noise you make when you discover that everything you believed about your life was a lie, compressed into one moment of pure, devastating recognition. On the wall, in perfect high-definition clarity, her husband was telling my wife that she was the sister I should have married, while they lay in my bed, in my house, during what was supposed to be Tessa's book club night. "Turn it off!" Julian shouted, lunging toward the laptop. But Mickey was still there, and Mickey had been a boxer for 50 years before he became a trainer. Julian found himself gently but firmly guided back to where he'd been standing, Mickey's hand on his shoulder like a friendly suggestion that carried the weight of absolute authority. "Let's see how this story ends," Mickey said calmly. The video continued. 6 months of evidence compressed into a 10-minute highlight reel, complete with timestamps and audio that carried clearly through the room's sound system. Every secret meeting, every mocking conversation about my obliviousness, every strategic discussion about how to maximize their financial gain from the situation. But it was the audio that really destroyed them. Julian's voice filled the room. "Nessa's so desperate to keep me happy she'll believe anything, and she controls all the family money, so we need to be careful about timing." Tessa's response. "Cole's the same way. He's so focused on his little woodworking projects, he has no idea what's happening with our finances. I've been moving money out of our joint accounts for months." Julian again. "Once we're together, we'll have access to both family fortunes. Your divorce settlement, plus whatever I can get from Nessa before she figures out what's happening." I watched the faces in the room as the truth sank in. These weren't just two people having an affair. They were predators who had been systematically planning to destroy two marriages and steal everything they could in the process. Nessa had stopped screaming and was now standing perfectly still, staring at the wall with the kind of focus that meant she was memorizing every word. Her face had gone completely white, except for 2 spots of red high on her cheekbones. "Turn it off," Tessa said, her voice shaking. "Please, Cole, just turn it off." "But we haven't gotten to the best part yet," I replied, advancing to the next section of the video. This is where Julian explains his exit strategy. Julian's voice. "The beauty of it is that they'll both be so humiliated, they won't fight us in court. Cole's too proud to air his dirty laundry in public, and Nessa's too concerned about her reputation to let this become a scandal." Tessa. "What about the kids? Emma adores you." Julian. "Kids adapt. And honestly, Tessa, Emma will be better off with a stepfather who can actually provide for her future. Cole's a nice guy, but he's never going to be more than a small-time craftsman." That was the moment I saw Emma's face in the doorway. She'd gotten off work early and come to find me, probably worried about how the evening was going. Now she was standing in Nessa's foyer, listening to the man she'd called Uncle Julian, for most of her life, dismiss her father as irrelevant. The expression on her face was something I'd never seen before, a combination of hurt and fury that made her look older than her 16 years. "Emma." Tessa started toward her, but Emma held up a hand. "Don't," Emma said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "Just don't." She walked into the living room, pulled out her phone, and started recording. "I want everyone to see this," she announced. "I want everyone to know exactly what kind of people they are." The video on the wall was reaching its climax, the conversation from Thursday night when Julian and Tessa had discussed their plan for tonight's party. Julian's voice. "Nessa thinks she's throwing us an engagement party. She has no idea that we've been together for 6 months, or that I'm planning to divorce her next week." Tessa. "She's going to be devastated." Julian. "She'll get over it, and if she doesn't, that's not our problem." I paused the video and looked around the room. 30 people, all staring at Julian and Tessa like they were looking at strangers. The silence was so complete, I could hear the grandfather clock in Nessa's hallway ticking. "Now," I said, opening the briefcase, "for those of you who are interested in the financial details of this new beginning, I've prepared some documentation." I started distributing the folders, handing them to family members and close friends with the efficiency of someone who'd practiced this moment. Bank statements, transfer records, a complete timeline of how my wife and brother-in-law had been systematically stealing from both of their spouses. "Cole," Nessa said quietly, "how long have you known?" "I found out Tuesday night. The video evidence goes back 6 months, but I suspect it's been going on longer than that." She nodded slowly, then walked over to Julian with the measured steps of someone who was working very hard to maintain control. "Get out of my house," she said. "Nessa, let me explain. Get out of my house or I'm calling the police." Julian looked around the room, maybe hoping for support or sympathy, but found nothing but disgusted faces and people pointedly looking away. He started toward the door, then stopped and turned back to me. You think you've won something here, Cole? You think humiliating us in front of everyone makes you the better man? I considered the question seriously. No, Julian. I think telling the truth makes me an honest man. There's a difference. He left without another word, Tessa following behind him like she was sleepwalking. They didn't look at each other, didn't speak, didn't acknowledge the 30 people watching them leave. They just walked out of Nessa's house and out of our lives. The room stayed silent for a long moment after they were gone. Then Emma walked over and hugged me, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. People offering support, asking questions, expressing outrage at what they'd witnessed. But I was watching Nessa, who was still standing in the middle of her living room, holding one of my evidence folders and staring at nothing. "Nessa," I said, walking over to her, "are you okay?" She looked up at me with eyes that were completely dry, but somehow more devastating than tears would have been. "I threw them a party," she said. "I spent 3 days planning a celebration for the people who destroyed my marriage." "You didn't know." "I should have known. The signs were all there, weren't they? I just didn't want to see them." Emma joined us, slipping her hand into mine. "What happens now?" she asked. I looked around Nessa's living room, at the family and friends who were still processing what they'd witnessed, at the evidence folders scattered on tables and chairs, at the blank wall where the truth had finally been projected for everyone to see. "Now we figure out how to move forward," I said. "All of us." Nessa nodded slowly, then surprised me by reaching out and squeezing my shoulder. "Thank you," she said, "for telling the truth, for making sure I found out before it was too late to protect myself." "Thank you for throwing the party," I replied. It was exactly the audience this story needed. And for the first time in 6 months, I felt like I could breathe again. The celebration of new beginnings had turned out to be exactly that, just not the way anyone had expected.